Are you ready for the shocking truth about surviving in the wild without modern technology? For centuries, the indigenous peoples of North America have endured the harshest weather conditions on the vast plains and in the dense forests. Their methods of coping with destructive rainstorms remained a mystery to many European explorers for a long time. Every action in the camp before an approaching storm was strictly regulated by ancient traditions and rules. Watch the video to the end to learn how the architecture of portable dwellings and strict nighttime routines helped Native Americans stay completely dry, even during days of devastating storms. What if I told you that everything you believed was not true? The choice of a place to camp was never a random decision made by the chief or elders. The camp was always set up taking into account the invisible water flows that inevitably form during heavy rain. The Indians of the Great Plains knew how to read the terrain like an open book. They avoided lowlands and dry riverbeds, knowing full well their treacherous nature. Each tent was pitched on a small hill, ensuring natural drainage away from the main entrance. Nomadic peoples carefully studied the type of soil before setting up their mobile dwellings. The ground had to absorb water rather than turn into slippery and dangerous mud. Sandy and rocky areas were valued much more highly than dense and beautiful grassy meadows. Grass retained moisture on the surface, creating constant dampness around the entire camp. On the right soil, water quickly drained deep below the surface. This fundamental rule ensured the basic dryness of the entire vast Indian settlement. The distance between individual dwellings was calculated with remarkable mathematical precision. Tents were never placed too close to each other, even in peacetime. Water flowing from one roof should not flood the neighbor's territory. Sufficient space between buildings ensured free and constant air circulation. The wind blew excess moisture out of the camp, significantly accelerating the drying process of the ground. This strict order helped to prevent the settlement from turning into a continuous swamp. The tribes of the eastern forests used a slightly different approach to choosing a location for their buildings. Their longhouses were built to last for many years and required the most reliable foundations possible. The Iroquois always chose high ground with dense loam, which held its shape very well. A natural drainage system was always created around such a house using the slopes of the surrounding terrain. Nature itself actively helped to divert torrential streams of water away from the massive wooden walls. The right choice of land was the main guarantee of the durability of the entire huge structure. The peoples of the subarctic regularly faced ice storms that required special preparation. The Cree and Athabascan tribes sought out dense spruce forests to set up their traditional shelters. The dense needles perfectly retained moisture, creating a dry area directly under the tree branches. The layer of fallen needles on the ground served as an excellent natural insulator against cold and dampness. In such secluded places, water practically did not accumulate on the soil surface. This allowed people to wait out the harshest weather in relative warmth and comfort. Before nightfall, the entire camp went into a state of high alert. All valuable household items were stored under reliable shelters or inside living quarters. Absolutely nothing that could be damaged by the approaching moisture was left outside. Leather belts, tools, and craft supplies were carefully hidden in dry places. This rule was strictly observed by all members of the tribe without exception. The negligence of a single person could lead to the destruction of very valuable property. The Indians did not perceive heavy rain as an enemy, but as a harsh natural force. They simply knew how to fit into natural processes without unnecessary resistance. Their methods were based on an incredibly deep understanding of the physics of water and wind. Each rule was paid for by centuries of hard experience of survival in harsh conditions. It would be very interesting to hear your opinion on this approach to choosing a place to camp, so be sure to write about it in the comments. And of course, be sure to subscribe to our channel to gain new historical knowledge. Are you ready to learn the truth about the construction of Native American dwellings? The tipi of the nomadic peoples of the Great Plains is a true masterpiece of mobile architecture. Its unique cone shape was the most ideal response to heavy rains. Water droplets did not linger on the steep slopes of the dense leather roof. They instantly rolled down under the natural force of gravity. The surface remained practically dry even during the heaviest downpour. The shell of the tipi was sewn from specially treated bison hides. Craftsmen joined pieces of material with strong tendons that had a unique property. At the slightest sign of moisture, these threads swelled, tightly sealing all the seams. Water simply could not penetrate the tightly pulled holes made by the bone needle. The material itself was impregnated with fat, which effectively repelled any moisture from the surface. Such leather armor provided extremely reliable protection for the entire interior living space. Installing the frame required very precise adherence to the angles of inclination of all the poles. A strong bundle of 3 or 4 main poles created an unshakable foundation. The remaining poles were laid in a circle in a strictly defined traditional order. The correct geometry ensured that the leather covering was stretched completely evenly. Any sagging of the material would inevitably lead to water accumulation and serious leaks. Native American women erected these complex structures flawlessly in a matter of minutes. Subarctic tribes regularly built conical wigwams out of poles and thick birch bark. Birch bark has excellent natural water-repellent properties due to its special resin content. Strips of bark were sewn together with spruce roots to form long, waterproof rolls. These rolls were wrapped around a wooden frame strictly from the bottom up. The upper layers always overlapped the lower ones, reliably directing water flows outward. Inside such a birch cone, it was always very warm and completely dry. The entrance to any traditional dwelling required a special protection system. The door to a tipi was a piece of thick leather stretched tightly over a willow hoop. During heavy rain, this flap was tightly tied to the poles of the main frame. The wind could not blow it aside or blow moisture directly inside. To go outside, it was necessary to carefully move only a small part of this leather door. This minimized the amount of cold rain entering the comfortable living area. The architecture of Native American dwellings brilliantly demonstrates a deep understanding of the laws of physics. Every detail of the construction served the single purpose of preserving heat and absolute dryness. Natural materials and skilled hands were transformed into the most reliable shield against the elements. This valuable knowledge was passed down from elders to younger generations without any drawings or records. How difficult do you think it was to maintain such structures in peacetime? In the next chapter, you will learn how they managed smoke and air during the heaviest downpours. Want to know a secret that will change your life? Controlling the smoke hole of a teepee during a rainstorm was a real and very difficult art. At the very top of the leather cone were 2 special large valves. They were adjusted by long external poles directly from the ground. Correct adjustment of these valves saved the interior from complete flooding. The Indians turned a simple hole in the roof into an incredibly complex aerodynamic system. At the slightest approach of a storm, the position of the valves changed immediately and radically. If the wind blew from the north, the northern leather valve closed completely. The southern valve remained slightly open to allow smoke to escape safely from the hearth. Strong winds flowed around the closed side, creating an area of low pressure on the other side. This artificial draft literally sucked the smoke out, completely preventing rain from getting inside. The system worked flawlessly regardless of the strength of the approaching hurricane. The air draft inside any dwelling was also strictly controlled. The lower edge of the leather interior lining was raised in strategically important places. Fresh, cool air entered from below, quickly heated by the fire, and rushed upward. This constant warm flow prevented moisture from settling on the walls and personal belongings. Everyday clothes always remained dry thanks to this continuous ventilation. The cold wind became a faithful ally in the fight against excessive humidity. The hearth was always located strictly in the geometric center of the round dwelling. This wise decision ensured uniform heating of the entire interior volume of the teepee. The heat from the hot coals created a thermal dome that powerfully repelled the moist air. Drops that accidentally broke through the upper smoke hole evaporated instantly. They completely turned into steam before they reached the earthen floor. Fire was the real heart of this ancient climate control system. The aerodynamics of the teepee allowed it to easily withstand storm winds of enormous destructive force. The conical shape was pressed tightly to the ground by the enormous pressure of the oncoming air. The stronger the wind blew, the more stable the entire structure became. The upper valves served as a kind of reliable stabilizer for the turbulent airflow. They extinguished dangerous vortices at the top, preventing the sudden collapse of the roof. The genius of this engineering solution has been proven by many centuries of successful use. The Indian craftsmen created the perfect balance between good ventilation and reliable protection. They subjugated the harsh wind, forcing it to work to heat their homes. These traditional mobile structures are still being studied closely by modern architects. Each nighttime rule had a very clear practical justification for survival. Their approach to the laws of nature inspires sincere and profound admiration. Be sure to like this video if you are impressed by the incredible ingenuity of the indigenous peoples of America. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret. Despite the perfect roof, water sometimes seeped in through the wet soil. To completely prevent flooding of the floor, the Indians used a hidden drainage system. Inside the tipi, a shallow trench was carefully dug around the entire inner perimeter. It was securely hidden under a layer of bedding and was completely invisible to the eye. This groove intercepted any excess moisture coming in from the damp ground outside. The drainage trench always had a very slight slope toward the door entrance. At the entrance itself, it was discreetly connected to an external drainage channel. All the rainwater that got under the edges of the tent flowed quietly back out onto the street. The floor inside the leather cone remained completely dry and firm even after a week of rain. Strong, wide shovels made of bone or very hard wood were used as digging tools. This important earthwork was always carried out immediately after the wooden frame was erected. In the longhouses of the Northeast, the problem of damp floors was solved in a much more radical way. There, special wooden platforms were built, raised high above the ground on sturdy posts. People lived, slept, and stored their belongings on these high wooden platforms. The earthen floor far below was used only for walking and building large fires. Water could flow freely under the floor without causing any inconvenience to the inhabitants. The wood of these platforms always remained perfectly dry thanks to the heat from the hearths. Subarctic peoples thickly covered the floor with a huge amount of fresh coniferous branches. A thick layer of spruce branches created an incredibly elastic and very warm cushion. The natural resin contained in the needles acted as an excellent antiseptic and insulator. The lower branches could get damp, but the top layer always remained perfectly dry. Periodically, the old branches were thrown away and replaced with a completely new fresh layer. The pleasant smell of pine needles was an excellent bonus to the dry microclimate. All items inside the Indian dwelling were strictly organized according to the level of moisture protection required. The most valuable items were hung high on poles of the frame under the leather roof itself. It was warmest there. An insidious moisture simply could not reach them. Heavy chests made of thick rawhide were placed on special wooden stands. No item was ever left lying on the bare earthen floor. Perfect order in the tent was the main guarantee of the preservation of all the tribe's property. A separate large-scale system of trenches was dug outside, around the entire large settlement. These wide channels diverted large streams of water from the hill on which the camp stood. Keeping all the outer trenches perfectly clean was a common and important responsibility. It is amazing how simple grooves in the ground saved entire peoples from the terrible cold. This basic earthwork technology became the most important basis for survival on the harsh continent. Every detail of their harsh life inspires great respect for the wisdom of the ancient builders. Did you know about such complex engineering solutions used by Native Americans? In the next chapter, you will learn how nomadic tribes kept their fires burning during the most terrible rainstorms. Fire was the most important basis of life in any Native American camp during bad weather. Keeping hot coals alive became the most important task before the onset of a long rainy night. To do this, they successfully used an ancient technique of preserving the flame with ash. Hot charcoal was gathered into a very dense pile in the center of the hearth. Then it was carefully covered with a thick layer of dry ash on all sides. The ash blocked the oxygen supply, causing the coals to smolder very slowly for long hours. Such a preserved hearth did not produce an open flame, but retained an incredibly strong heat. In the morning, it was enough to rake the ashes and add a little dry tinder. At the slightest breath, the smoldering coals instantly burst into a bright, hot fire. This daily procedure allowed them to save scarce dry firewood during a storm that lasted several days. The hostess of the teepee could easily restore a full-fledged fire in a couple of minutes without a flint. The reliability of this method had been proven over thousands of years and was considered absolute. Carrying fire during long migrations in the rain required unique equipment. For this purpose, special closed clay or thick horn pots were created. Smoldering coals were placed inside, sprinkled with rotten wood dust and damp moss. The moss prevented the coals from burning at full strength, while the wood dust kept them smoldering. The pot was tightly closed, leaving only a tiny hole for air to flow in. This allowed the fire to travel with the tribe through any heavy rain. Forest tribes often used ordinary wood-decaying fungi to store fire. A large dry fungus could smolder for days without turning into light ash. It was hung on a sturdy leather strap under clothing, protected from raindrops by the body. The heat of the smoldering fungus also pleasantly warmed its wearer during long journeys. At a new campsite, this fungus was quickly used to build a large communal fire. Nature itself generously provided the ideal organic materials for survival. The warmth of the hearth was not just an ordinary physical phenomenon for the tribe. It symbolized the strong unity of the family and the reliability of the home circle. The ability to keep a weak flame burning through a storm was a sign of maturity and vast experience. This ancient knowledge ensured the survival of entire generations on the endless plains. Fire always remained a faithful ally to those who knew its secret laws. The wisdom of the ancestors burned brightly in every ember preserved through the rain. A secret passed down from generation to generation. Organizing a sleeping place on a rainy night was always subject to strict rules of isolation from the ground. Indians never slept directly on the cold soil during a heavy storm. The base was a very thick layer of dry prairie grass collected in advance. This grass was woven into dense mats, creating a springy barrier between the body and the ground. The porous structure of the dry grasses trapped warm air, working like a modern mattress. Magnificent thick skins with thick fur were laid on top of the grass mats. The skins for bedding were processed using a special technology to maximize the softness of the leather. Thick fur has a unique density and excellently retains the temperature of the human body. Even if the humidity in the teepee rose significantly, the fur always remained dry to the touch. People literally sank into this warm cocoon, reliably protected from any drafts. These beds were considered the most valuable and important property of a nomadic family. For tribes living in dense forests, the design of the beds was even more complex. The Iroquois built very wide wooden shelves along the walls of their long houses. These shelves rose high above the earthen floor, completely eliminating contact with dampness. Sleeping on a raised platform provided ideal protection from drafts coming from below. Firewood was often stored under the bunks, which further insulated the sleepers from the cold ground. The well-thought-out ergonomics ensured a very healthy sleep in any prolonged bad weather. The willow backrests for the beds were a true masterpiece of Plains Indian engineering. They were skillfully woven from thin twigs and installed at the head and foot of the bed. These backrests served not only for comfort, but also as climatic protective screens. They completely blocked the movement of cold air along the walls of the tent directly onto the sleeping people. An additional skin was often thrown over the backs, creating a miniature tent inside the main teepee. The temperature inside such a shelter was very high and comfortable. Daytime clothing was never used for sleeping in cold, rainy weather. Before going to bed, wet moccasins and leggings were always taken off and hung by the fire. People went to bed in clean, specially prepared dry clothes or covered with skins. Mixing street dampness with the sleeping area was strictly prohibited by camp rules. This was very strictly monitored by the older, experienced women in each family. A dry bed guaranteed good health and strength for the next day. In the morning, all bedding was subjected to a mandatory airing and drying procedure. As soon as the rain stopped, the skins were taken outside and hung out in the bright sun. If the storm dragged on, the beds were neatly rolled up and stored on special stands. The fur was not supposed to absorb excess moisture from the air during the day. Order in the teepee was maintained with incredible pedantry and strict neatness. Space was freed up for the important daily activities of the entire Indian family. The peoples of the far north used the skins of polar wolves and bears to warm their beds. The thick undercoat of these animals did not let the cold through, even at extremely low temperatures. Leather bags tightly stuffed with dry moss or down served as pillows. The moss was first dried to a crisp in the hot summer sun. It excellently absorbed excess sweat and moisture during long nights of sleep. Nature generously provided everything necessary for a very comfortable rest. The organization of sleep proves the highest level of domestic culture of the ancient Indian tribes. They knew how to rest in comfort, completely inaccessible to many European colonists of that time. These strict rules for keeping the bed dry saved the people from enormous heat loss. Do you now understand why proper sleep was so important for survival? In the next chapter, you will learn how Native Americans created waterproof clothing without modern chemicals. Protecting the body from getting wet began with the proper treatment of clothing materials. Native American craftsmen used a very complex process of tanning leather with organic fats. The hide was cleaned, and then a special thick paste was thoroughly rubbed into it. This substance broke down the tough fibers, making the leather incredibly soft and elastic. The process was repeated several times until the most perfect result was achieved. After such heavy processing, the material acquired excellent water-repellent properties. The final stage in the creation of waterproof suede was very intensive and lengthy smoking. A special smoke fire was lit using fresh, raw branches and resinous cones. The leather was stretched over the thick smoke and kept in this state for a long time. The smoke deeply saturated the pores of the material, dyeing it a beautiful golden brown color. The soot acted as a powerful natural fixative, preventing the leather from hardening after getting wet. Water simply rolled off the soot-covered surface of traditional clothing. Thick, fatty grease was used not only for clothing, but also for the body itself. Before going out in heavy rain, the Indians rubbed animal fat generously into exposed areas of skin. This fat created a completely invisible but powerful waterproof film on the body. Raindrops simply bounced off the skin without cooling its surface at all. This ancient practice was especially common among subarctic tribes during periods of icy downpours. The fat also provided excellent protection against drying out and cracking in the cold wind. The tribes of the Northeast skillfully used the natural properties of bark to create protective equipment. Wide visors and peculiar hats were made from birch bark to keep water away from the face and neck. Birch bark capes were very light and completely waterproof on all sides. They were tied together with strong roots and worn over basic clothing when working in the rain. The bark did not require any complicated processing and was always in abundance in the forests. It was an incredibly quick and very practical solution to the problem of dampness. Leggings covering the legs from the hip to the ankle had a very special cut. They were made wide so as not to restrict movement when walking through wet, tall grass. On the outside of the leggings, a long fringe of cut suede was often left. This fringe served not only as decoration, but also as a kind of reliable water drainage. Water rolled down the threads of the fringe and dripped onto the ground without being absorbed into the main fabric of the pants. Every detail of the Indian costume had a strict and very functional purpose. Wet clothes were dried inside the tipi using a very precise and strict technique. Clothes were never hung too close to a hot open flame. The leather could dry out, shrink, and permanently lose its elasticity from the intense heat. Clothes were carefully spread out on special frames in a warm area under the roof. Moisture slowly and safely evaporated under the influence of a constant flow of dry air. After drying, the clothes were always kneaded by hand to restore their original softness. Sewing threads made from organic materials played a huge role in waterproofing. As already mentioned, they swelled significantly from moisture, blocking all the holes in the seams. Native American women sewed with very small and frequent stitches for maximum seam strength. Very thin bone awls were used to pierce the leather, which did not tear the fibers of the material. The seam was absolutely tight and incredibly reliable, capable of withstanding any tension. The art of sewing was passed down through the female line from generation to generation for centuries. Native American clothing was a true climatic armor, wisely created from the gifts of nature. No modern membrane fabrics could compare to the durability of properly tanned suede. Traditional clothing served its owners for decades, withstanding the harshest weather conditions. This perfect balance between practicality and aesthetics remains an unattainable ideal for many modern designers. Survival in the wild required clothing that became a second skin. Knowledge of materials was the key to overcoming the merciless elements. Preserving food supplies during prolonged rains was a matter of life and death. A damp environment could completely destroy a tribe's entire food supply in just a few days. The basis of Native American food security was pemmican, a unique product with an incredibly long shelf life. It consisted of dried and ground meat mixed with melted fat. Dried berries were often added to this nutritious mixture for flavor and to preserve vitamins. Pemmican was completely impervious to moisture due to its incredibly high fat content. Pemmican was stored in parfleys, special envelopes made of stiff rawhide. Parfleys were made from thick hides, cleaned of wool, and dried in the hot sun. This material became as hard as plywood and completely impervious to water. The pouches were tightly and securely laced with leather straps, creating an almost airtight package. Parflashes were hung high under the roof of the tipi, where it was always very warm and dry. This reliably guaranteed the preservation of the main food product in any violent storm. Dried meat that was not processed into pemmican required very special care. The dried strips of meat were always stored in canvas or leather bags with good ventilation. When rainy weather set in, these bags were immediately moved closer to the hot hearth. The smoke from the fire constantly enveloped the supplies, preventing the appearance of dangerous mold and rot. Additional light smoking right inside the dwelling reliably saved the meat from spoilage. The air in the tent was always thick with the appetizing smells of smoke and dried food. Tribes engaged in agriculture stored their crops in incredibly deep underground pits. The Iroquois dug huge storage pits, the walls of which were tightly lined with birch bark and dry grass. Corn, beans, and pumpkins were neatly stacked in layers, sprinkled with ash from pests. The pit was covered with a sturdy wooden lid and covered with a very thick layer of earth. Even the strongest and most prolonged rains could not penetrate such a depth through the dense soil. The supplies remained dry and absolutely fresh until early spring. Wild rice, harvested by the tribes of the Great Lakes, also required serious protection from moisture. After harvesting, the grains were roasted very carefully on hot stones or in cauldrons. This necessary heat treatment completely removed all excess moisture from inside the seeds. The rice was stored in sturdy bags made of tightly woven cedar bark or thick birch bark. The bags were placed on wooden platforms under reliable awnings, hidden from slanting rain. Properly processed rice could be reliably stored for years without losing its nutritional properties. Herbs, roots, and medicinal plants were stored with particular care. Bunches of medicinal herbs were carefully hung on the frame of the teepee in a strictly defined order. Each plant occupied its ideal temperature level under the conical roof. Moisture is extremely destructive to dry herbs, quickly depriving them of their healing power. Therefore, shamans and experienced tribal healers monitored their condition very carefully. At the slightest suspicion of dampness, the plants were immediately moved to a warmer place. Cooking utensils and dishes were made from materials that were completely impervious to water. The Indians used wooden bowls, horn spoons, and very durable clay pots. The pottery was fired at a very high temperature, making it strong and completely waterproof. After meals, all the dishes were cleaned very thoroughly with sand and rinsed with clean water. They were never left dirty on damp ground during heavy rain. Clean utensils were neatly stacked in baskets and stored on high wooden stands. Salt was extremely rare and valued literally at the weight of pure gold. It was extracted with great difficulty from salt lakes or traded with other tribes. For reliable storage of salt, special small horns were made from hard hooves. The horn was tightly sealed with a wooden stopper and generously coated with sticky tree resin. Salt instantly absorbs water, so its insulation had to be truly perfect. This precious product was kept in the most reliable and dry corner of the Indian dwelling. Obtaining fresh meat during a very long storm was incredibly difficult. Hunters rarely went out in the pouring rain, as it was completely ineffective. Game also hid from the weather, and tracks were instantly washed away by torrential streams of water. Wet bowstrings lost their elasticity, making shooting almost impossible. Therefore, the tribe relied entirely on its competently and reliably stored supplies. The culture of accumulating and properly storing provisions was the most important basis for the survival of society. Native American methods of food preservation are striking in their incredible efficiency and simplicity. They did without refrigerators, artificial preservatives, and metal cans. The skillful use of fat, thick smoke, and drying allowed them to preserve calories for many months. This gave nomadic peoples complete freedom of movement across the vast and harsh continent. Nature dictated harsh rules, and people learned to play by them flawlessly. Every ounce of food was extremely well protected from the destructive power of water. Weapons were the most important tool for survival, and protecting them from moisture was a priority. Bows, arrows, and spears required constant care and extremely careful storage during rainy weather. Powerful composite bows glued together from wood and antler, feared water more than anything else. Moisture could dissolve the organic glue, and an expensive bow would simply fall apart. Therefore, such bows were always stored in special waterproof covers made of thick leather. The covers were incredibly richly decorated and were the main symbol of a warrior's high status. The bowstring was most often made from tightly twisted animal tendons. When wet, these tendons stretched significantly and completely lost their elasticity. A hunter with a wet bowstring instantly became completely defenseless in the face of danger. Spare dry bowstrings were always kept in horn cases deep in the warrior's bosom. Before going out in the rain, the bowstring was generously lubricated with thick animal fat or wax. This provided short-term protection if fighting in bad weather was absolutely unavoidable. Arrows were stored in quivers made of very thick, waterproof leather. The quiver was shaped like a tube with a tightly closing leather lid. The lid reliably protected the arrow feathers from being crushed and getting wet in the rain. Wet feathers disrupted the aerodynamics of the arrow, making accurate and long-range shooting impossible. Inside the quiver, the arrows were packed tightly so that they did not rub against each other at all. A good quiver guaranteed that the weapon was absolutely ready for battle at any unexpected moment. Arrow shafts were skillfully carved from very straight shoots of willow or cornel. The wood was dried and straightened over hot coals to achieve perfect flatness. Moist air could easily warp the shaft, so the arrows were regularly checked and straightened. The surface of the wood was rubbed with special polishing stones with the addition of fat for smoothness. This reliably protected the pores of the wood from moisture penetration from the surrounding air. Each warrior personally and incredibly closely monitored the perfect condition of his combat equipment. Stone and metal spearheads were not afraid of direct contact with water. However, moisture caused dangerous rust on iron blades obtained from European traders. To protect the metal, the Indians thickly coated the blades with a thick layer of bear fat. Knives were carried in incredibly thick leather sheaths that protected the blade from direct contact with rain. Stone axes and tomahawks were stored inside the tipi, away from the damp ground. Deep respect for weapons was an essential part of the military etiquette of every tribe. Fire-making tools required truly paranoid protection from any moisture. Flint, tinder, and kindling were stored in several thick layers of waterproof materials. They were often wrapped in bladders and then placed in a thick leather pouch. The warrior always carried this pouch with him, constantly warming it with his body heat. Losing the ability to start a fire was tantamount to a death sentence in the cold and wet prairie. Therefore, the fire-starting kit was guarded much more carefully than one's own life. The shields of the Great Plains Indians were made of incredibly thick leather from the neck. A properly tanned and dried shield could easily stop an enemy arrow, but heavy moisture made the leather very heavy, soft, and vulnerable to blows. During long rains, the shields were hidden in special covers made of thin suede. The cover not only protected against moisture, but also concealed the sacred designs on the shield. These unique designs carried magical powers that could not be revealed without good reason. Drums used for important ceremonies also suffered greatly from humid air. The leather membrane sagged, and the loud sound became muffled and completely inexpressive. To restore the drum's voice, it was carefully heated over hot coals in the hearth. The dry heat tightened the skin, instantly restoring the instrument's clear and powerful sound. Ceremonial items were always kept in the most honorable and dry places in the teepee. The spiritual life of the tribe did not stop even during the most violent and dark storms. The equipment for carrying loads, consisting of rawhide straps, required regular care. Rain made the straps slippery, and subsequent drying turned them into stiff wire. Men spent long hours in the teepee, carefully kneading and greasing these leather strips. This monotonous work reliably saved the straps from cracks and tears during long walks. Portages were the main means of transportation for the Plains Indians, and caring for their equipment was sacred. Wet weather provided an excellent time to bring all tools into perfect order. During rain, the Indian camp turned into a very large craft workshop. People made good use of their forced inactivity outside to repair and adjust their equipment. In the silence of the dry teepee, knives were sharpened, bows were glued, and new warm clothes were sewn. Everything was completely ready for immediate use as soon as the sun came out. This wise approach guaranteed the tribe technical superiority over the harsh living conditions. Protecting tools was the most reliable guarantee of successful hunting and the safety of the entire people. Long periods of heavy rain created a very serious psychological burden on people. The confined space of a cramped teepee could easily cause irritation and conflict between family members. To avoid this, the Indians developed an incredibly strict system of social behavior within the dwelling. Each person was assigned their own personal, absolutely inviolable place by the common hearth. Violating someone else's space without direct permission was considered a very rude insult. This clear and centuries-old order prevented any quarrels due to forced crowding. Rain forced people to greatly reduce their activity and switch to a calm mode of contemplation. Loud conversation or shouting inside the tent at this time was incredibly strictly condemned. Communication took place in quiet, measured voices, blending smoothly with the sound of falling raindrops. The elders actively used this time to pass on their wisdom and teach the other members of the tribe. In the dim light of the teepee, ancient legends about the creation of the vast world and great heroes were told. These important stories incredibly strengthened the spiritual bond between all members of the tribe. The women engaged in quiet domestic work that required incredible concentration and precision. They skillfully embroidered clothing with porcupine quills, creating very complex and beautiful geometric patterns. This incredibly painstaking work calmed the mind and was an excellent way to pass the long rainy hours. Men could carefully carve smoking pipes from wood or craft new arrows. Quiet, unhurried work brought deep satisfaction and provided a reliable distraction from the inclement weather outside. The hands of the Native Americans were always busy with useful tasks for the benefit of the entire family. Smoking a pipe was an incredibly important social ritual during prolonged storms. Tobacco was mixed with red willow bark, creating a very fragrant and soothing mixture. The pipe was slowly passed around the circle strictly clockwise, symbolizing the course of the sun. This process greatly united people, putting them in a very peaceful and philosophical mood. The smoke from the pipe blended smoothly with the smoke from the hearth, creating a thick veil of calm. It was a kind of collective meditation, reliably saving people from any anxiety. Men and women played board games to keep their spirits up during bad weather. Adults played ancient dice games, skillfully made from plum pits or horns. There were a huge number of complex guessing games that developed intuition and observation skills. These entertainments were accompanied by quiet laughter and friendly jokes, which perfectly lightened the mood. The excitement helped to forget about the cold and dampness raging behind the thin leather walls. Joy has always been the best medicine for severe despondency. Meals during forced inactivity were also incredibly strictly regulated. Food was taken in very small portions, as people did not expend much energy on hunting. The basis of the diet was incredibly hot broths made from pemmican and dried medicinal roots. Hot food warmed them up from the inside and gave them a strong sense of security and comfort. Eating together strengthened family ties and emphasized the absolute equality of all members of the community. No one ever went hungry as long as there were common supplies in the camp. Their attitude toward the elements was filled with incredibly deep reverence and respect. The Indians did not curse the heavy rain, but perceived it as a great cleansing of the earth. Thunder was considered the loud voice of the powerful spirits of the heavens, flying rapidly over the earth. Lightning was perceived as their fiery arrows, brightly illuminating the darkness of this world. This religious awe greatly helped them to accept bad weather with great calm and humility. People were keenly aware of their tiny place in the vast and powerful world of nature. Shamans performed special, very quiet ceremonies to appease the fierce spirits of the storm. They burned sacred buffalo grass, whose sweet aroma completely purified the space of the teepee. Prayers were uttered in a barely audible whisper so as not to anger the fierce forces of nature. Spiritual leaders sincerely asked the elements to show mercy to the camp and nourish the earth with moisture. Their absolute confidence and calmness spread to all the other inhabitants of the huge settlement. Their unshakable faith provided tremendous psychological support in the most difficult situations. When the rain finally stopped completely, the camp instantly came to life and was transformed. People came outside with great joy, greeting the sun and the fresh, purified air. They immediately began actively drying their belongings, checking their equipment, and preparing for the hunt. The difficult ordeal of the storm had been overcome, and the tribe had survived thanks to their knowledge and discipline. The invaluable experience of each storm they weathered made them even stronger and incredibly resilient. Life confidently continued its eternal cycle across the vast expanses of the enormous continent. Psychological resilience was the most powerful and reliable weapon of the indigenous peoples of America. The ability to maintain peace in the soul and in the family was worth much more than any technology. They turned forced confinement in the tipi into an important time of spiritual enrichment and labor. This bright inner light helped them survive the darkest and longest nights. Their harmony with themselves and the world around them is truly worthy of the deepest study. The wisdom of these peoples has left an indelible mark on human history. We have examined in detail the amazing rules that help Native Americans stay dry and warm during the most destructive rainstorms. Their architecture, knowledge of materials, and incredibly strict social discipline merged into an ideal system of survival. The Indians never tried to conquer nature. They learned to live with it in absolute harmony. What topic about the life and customs of indigenous peoples interests you the most? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new exciting historical research.